December 1941 North Atlantic, near Iceland. Snow lashes across a convoy of Allied supply ships cutting through icy waves. On the deck of a British freighter, Sergeant Thomas Avery huddles beside a stack of crates, his breath turning to fog in the bitter wind. His unit has been deployed to a new outpost in Iceland. No barracks, no heating, just the open tundra. The only shelter waiting for them, bundles of corrugated metal sheets and boxes of bolts marked Nissen Hut. Loss. For hours, Avery's men work with numb hands, struggling to hammer the curved steel ribs into the frozen ground. The wind howls through the gaps, scattering bolts into the snow. They are soldiers, not engineers, but the design demands precision. By nightfall, they've managed to raise only half the arching frame. "If this bloody war doesn't kill us," one corporal mutters, "the cold will." The Nissen Hut, a relic of World War I, was built to be practical, reusable, and sturdy. Invented by Major Peter Nissen, it served the British Empire across deserts, jungles, and tundras. But in this second Great War, the same design had become a burden. Each hut required skilled carpenters and metal workers, weeks of supply coordination, and a team of soldiers to erect it piece by piece. As Avery's crew crawls under a canvas sheet to escape the cold, the storm continues to rage. Somewhere across the ocean, America has just entered the war, and within months, her engineers will solve the very problem freezing these men to the bone. A new kind of hut is coming. It will not take a week to build. It will take one day. 1916, the Somme front, northern France. The earth trembles as German shells pound the British lines. Mud, smoke, and splinters rain from above. In a small field workshop behind the trenches, Major Peter Norman Nissen, a Canadian-born engineer in the Royal Engineers, sketches furiously on a scrap of paper, a curved line, an arc, a frame. Around him, exhausted soldiers repair what little remains of their wooden barracks, destroyed once again by artillery. "We need something simpler," Nissen mutters. "Something we can pack, carry, and raise before the next shell lands." Within weeks, his idea becomes reality. A semi-cylindrical steel structure, made from corrugated iron sheets bolted to arched ribs, fastened to a simple concrete or wooden base. It's cheap, compact, and easy to transport. Each piece fits into the next like ribs of a whale, forming a curved shell that can shed shrapnel and wind alike. By autumn of 1916, the first Nissen huts rise along the Western Front. Soldiers marvel at them. Simple, sturdy, quick to heat, and surprisingly comfortable. They serve as barracks, field hospitals, and supply stores. The British War Office approves them for mass use, and within a year, over 100,000 are deployed across France and the Middle East. But even as the Great War ends, the limitations are clear. The Nissen Hut's design depends on curved steel arches that must be bent precisely in factories, shipped in sections, and bolted together with skilled alignment. Each hut takes days, sometimes a week, to assemble, especially in difficult terrain. The frame alone weighs hundreds of kilograms. When the war ends, Nissen returns to civilian life, his invention sold across the empire from Kenya to India, from the Arctic to the Australian outback. For the British, it's a symbol of imperial engineering, rugged, uniform, and dependable. Yet by the time the Second World War erupts, warfare has changed. Speed now wins wars, and the British Empire's dependable hut is suddenly too slow. Across the Atlantic, a new industrial giant is about to reimagine it entirely. March 1942, Quonset Point Naval Air Station, Rhode Island. The Atlantic wind carries the smell of salt and steel. On the edge of the naval yard, teams of American engineers and Seabees gather around a large wooden platform. Laid out before them are dozens of curved, corrugated steel panels, but this isn't a British shipment. This is something new. Lieutenant Commander Otto F. Brandenberger, a U.S. Navy engineer, paces with a clipboard in hand. "Gentlemen," he says, gesturing to the components, "this is our answer to the Nissen Hut. It's lighter, faster, modular, and we're going to build it in less than 24 hours. The men exchange skeptical glances. The Nissen hut, used by the British for decades, had a reputation for durability but also for complexity. Its steel ribs required precise bending, its bolts had to be tightened by the dozen, and aligning its curved shape often took a week, even with skilled labor. But the Americans were at war now, and time was the enemy. The Navy's Bureau of Yards and Docks had contracted two Rhode Island companies, WWII, Fuller Company and Johns Manville, to create a new version of the Nissen hut that could be mass-produced, shipped anywhere in the world, and assembled by 6 men with basic tools. The team studied the British design and stripped it down to its essence. They replaced heavy steel ribs with lightweight prefabricated arches. They standardized every bolt and joint, and they designed the panels so perfectly curved that no adjustment was needed on site. At Quonset Point, they laid the first foundation. Sheets of corrugated steel gleamed in the morning light as the Seabees worked in rhythm, hammering, bolting, locking panels in place. By sundown, the hut stood complete. A perfect, gleaming half-cylinder 16 feet wide, 36 feet long, and ready for use. The crowd erupted into cheers. The first Quonset hut was born, named for the place where it stood. A building that could be packed into crates, shipped across oceans, unloaded by hand, and erected in a single day. "That's not a shelter," one engineer said. "That's a revolution in a box." And it was. The Americans had taken Britain's wartime invention and turned it into something far greater, a product of industrial genius, logistical foresight, and pure mechanical efficiency. Before long, Quonset Point would roar with activity day and night, producing huts not by the dozens but by the thousands, each one destined to follow the Allied armies across every corner of the globe. Summer 1942, Quonset Point, Rhode Island. The air inside the George A. Fuller Company plant vibrated with the clang of hammers, the hiss of welding torches, and the low rumble of conveyor belts. Sparks showered from the assembly lines as thousands of steel panels rolled through presses, stamped into perfect arches, each one identical to the last. Under the harsh white lights, men and women worked in shifts that never ended. 8 hours on, 8 off, 24 hours a day. Every rivet, every bolt, every corrugated curve represented America's industrial heartbeat. Foreman Charles "Chuck" Dwyer, his overalls smeared with grease, shouted over the noise. "Every hut we build houses 50 men at the front. Keep 'em rolling." In less than a year, Quonset Point became one of the most productive construction facilities in the world. It wasn't just building shelters, it was building mobility, morale, and momentum. The Quonset Hut kits came off the line like clockwork. Our kit contained 16 prefabricated steel ribs, corrugated wall panels, wooden end frames with pre-cut windows and doors, nails, bolts, and assembly tools, a single instruction booklet, erectable in 24 hours, 6 men required. Each hut fit into a compact shipping crate that could be loaded onto any truck, train, or cargo ship. From the moment it left Rhode Island, a Quonset hut could reach North Africa, New Guinea, or Iceland within weeks and be standing, fully operational, a day after arrival. The plant workers took pride in it. They painted messages on the shipping crates, to Algiers, to Guadalcanal, to London. It wasn't just steel they were sending overseas, it was comfort, warmth, and survival. Meanwhile, British officers touring the factory could only watch in disbelief. Where the Nissen hut still required curved steel shipped in segments, the Quonset was a kit of precision engineering, interchangeable, repeatable, and perfectly standardized. The difference wasn't in the materials, it was in the philosophy. The Nissen hut was craftsmanship. The Quonset hut was mass production the American way. By the end of 1942, more than 27,000 huts had already been shipped out. By 1945, that number would exceed 150,000, scattered across the world like seeds of steel. From the beaches of Normandy to the jungles of the Pacific, they became the unmistakable silhouette of the American war effort, curved roofs glinting in the sun wherever the US military set foot. You could tell where the Americans were, one British officer later recalled. There was always a Quonset hut standing, dry and ready before you'd even found your toolbox. Novembre 1942 Algiers, North Africa. The beaches are chaos. Crates crash onto the sand as US engineers and Seabees rush to unload supplies under the roar of distant gunfire. The North African invasion, Operation Torch, has begun. Amid the confusion, a cluster of wooden boxes marked U.S. Navy Quonset Hut Kit lands beside a bulldozer. Chief Petty Officer Ray McKenna, a wiry Rhode Island native who'd once worked at Quonset Point, steps forward with a grin. "All right, boys, let's show the Brits what one day looks like." The crates crack open. Out spill corrugated steel panels, pre-cut beams, and neatly labelled bags of bolts. A team of 6 men begins assembly right on the beach. First, the foundation-level dirt, anchored with stakes. Then the ribs, 16 arches bolted to the base, rising in smooth succession like the spine of some great iron whale. Next, the panels' curved sheets locked together with rhythmic precision. Within 6 hours, the half-cylinder shape gleams in the desert Sunday. By nightfall, a line of completed huts stands against the horizon. Soldiers move in with cots, radios, and crates of rations. The first American command post in North Africa is operational, built in a single day. Nearby, British troops are still working on their Nissen huts, hammering steel ribs and tightening bolts by lantern light. The comparison is striking. "You Yanks make it look easy," one British sergeant admits. "It is," McKenna replies, lighting a cigarette. "That's the point." From that day forward, the Quonset hut became an icon of American presence. They appeared in every theatre. In Tunisia, serving as field hospitals for wounded soldiers. In Sicily, transformed into radio command centres. In Normandy, turned into mess halls and ammunition depots. In the Pacific, converted to barracks that withstood monsoon rain and typhoon wind. Each hut arrived as a flat-packed miracle, 10 tons of steel, 8 hours of work, and a roof for 50 men. No specialist tools, no architectural plans, no engineers required. By contrast, British Nissen huts still required skilled crews, curved structural jigs, and several days of alignment and bolting before they were livable. They were strong, yes, but not fast. And in this new kind of global war, speed meant everything. When US General Dwight D. Eisenhower inspected one of the first fully built Quonset camps in 1943, he famously remarked, "These huts win time and time wins wars." Under the glow of lanterns, McKenna and his crew sat inside their newly raised hut. The corrugated steel echoed softly with wind, but the air inside was warm. Outside, rain began to fall, and for the first time in months, the men slept dry. A hut built in a day and a symbol that the American war machine didn't just fight battles. It built victory. Spring 1944, somewhere in the Pacific, Guadalcanal. Rain pounds relentlessly on rows of steel roofs glinting beneath flashes of tropical lightning. From above, the US. Naval base looks like a metallic archipelago, hundreds of Quonset huts, perfectly aligned, stretching from the jungle's edge to the waterline. The sound of the downpour is deafening, yet inside each hut, men sleep dry and warm. CB Corporal Eddie Ramirez wakes to check for leaks, flashlight in hand. Water runs down the curved steel, draining harmlessly away. The hut doesn't flinch, no cracks, no rot, no collapse. "Still holding," he mutters, proud. It's a scene repeated across the world. From Iceland's frozen coasts to Australia's sweltering outback, Quonset huts became the skeleton of America's global logistics empire. They served as barracks, repair depots, radar stations, hospitals, mess halls, and command posts. Each hut could be customized. With wooden floors, insulation, and air vents, they became surprisingly comfortable. Some even had small windows and makeshift porches. Others were doubled in size by connecting 2 huts end to end, forming warehouses large enough to house tanks or aircraft parts. Engineers soon began calling them steel tents for an army without borders. In London, British officers watched with both admiration and disbelief. The Nissen hut had once been the pride of the empire, a symbol of ingenuity from the trenches of the Great War. But now, its American cousin had surpassed it in every metric: lighter, faster, cheaper, and infinitely reproducible. The reason was not just design, it was production philosophy. Britain's wartime manufacturing still relied on batch production, skilled labor, and limited tooling. America's was assembly line warfare, every bolt identical, every crate ready to ship, every instruction sheet the same. Factories across the US joined the Quonset network. In Detroit, auto plants pressed hut panels between runs of tank armor. In Pittsburgh, steel mills rolled sheets night and day. In California, dockyards stacked crates bound for the Pacific. Soon, Quonset huts dotted the map like footprints of industry. Wherever the US advanced, they followed silent witnesses to a new kind of warfare where logistics and engineering were weapons in their own right. At Guadalcanal, Ramirez steps outside as the rain fades into mist. Behind him, 100 huts gleam beneath the rising sun, a makeshift city built in a week, capable of housing thousands. He takes a deep breath of the humid air and smiles. "We built this," he says softly. All of it from crates. The huts had become more than shelter. They were proof that America could create order out of chaos, build permanence in places where nothing stood before. And as the Allies prepared for their greatest test, the invasion of Europe, those curved steel roofs would soon rise again, from the beaches of Normandy to the ruins of Berlin. May 1945, Southampton, England. The docks are alive with noise. Cargo ships unload the final waves of returning soldiers, crates, and equipment. Among the piles of war-worn machinery are thousands of Quonset hut kits, their labels faded but still legible. Quonset Point, RI, U.S. Navy property. Major Harold Whitaker, a logistics officer with the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers, oversees the unloading. He's seen these huts rise on beaches, in jungles, and on bombed-out airfields, but now they're coming home. "Funny thing," he says to a dock worker, "we built these for war, but they're about to rebuild peace. Across Europe and the Pacific, the war is ending, but the Quonset hut remains. In ravaged cities like Cherbourg, Naples, and Manila, they become the first signs of recovery: temporary hospitals, Red Cross stations, classrooms, and housing for displaced civilians. At British bases, soldiers begin dismantling their old Nissen huts, noting the irony. "The war started in these," one British corporal says, "and it's ending in theirs." The comparison is everywhere. The Nissen hut, though sturdy and reliable, could not adapt easily. Its heavy steel arches and complex assembly limited its use outside the military. The Quonset hut, however, was modular, flexible, and democratic, a structure anyone could assemble with a wrench and a few hours. By late 1945, American newspapers are filled with new headlines. Quonset, hoots for housing crisis. Returning vets find homes in steel domes. Across the United States, thousands of surplus huts are sold to civilians for as little as $1,000 each. They spring up on college campuses, at small-town airfields, and on the outskirts of cities. Veterans live in them while attending school under the GI Bill. Farmers turn them into barns and workshops. Entrepreneurs convert them into diners, motels, and dance halls. What began as a wartime shelter becomes an icon of post-war resilience, a piece of the battlefield reborn on Main Street America. In Britain, engineers take note. Inspired by the success of the Quonset, they begin modernizing their own prefabricated housing systems, merging old Nissen principles with American mass production. The age of prefab architecture has begun, and it started with 2 huts born from necessity on opposite sides of the Atlantic. As Whitaker watches a line of veterans load the last Quonset crates onto trucks bound for rural housing projects, he smiles. The huts that once sheltered soldiers in combat will now shelter their families in peace. "Maybe," he says quietly, "this was our best weapon after all." The sound of hammers echoes across the docks once more, not for war, but for rebuilding a world that had nearly destroyed itself. Autumn 1946 amperes quiet airfield outside London. The wind hums over two aging structures standing side by side. One British Nissen hut, dull and dented from years of use, and one American Quonset hut, shining faintly under the pale Sunday. For the first time, they are not on battlefields but on display. Engineers, architects, and officers from across Europe have gathered to study them both, the two steel arches that once defined shelter in war. Colonel Peter Fairbanks, of the British Royal Engineers, circles the Nissen hut slowly. Solid, dependable, but she needs craftsmen, he says. You can't build one without skill. He moves toward the Quonset, its pieces labelled neatly with stenciled numbers. This one, though, he smiles. This one any man can build, soldier or farmer alike. That was the heart of the difference. The Nissen hut, born in the mud of the First World War, was the creation of a single mind, an elegant solution for its time. The Quonset hut, born from America's industrial age, was the creation of a nation, an embodiment of mass production, teamwork, and speed. By 1947, the Quonset's curved silhouette had spread far beyond the military. In the frozen Aleutian Islands, they became weather stations. In Japan and Germany, they housed occupation troops. In Hawaii, they became schools and post offices. And across the United States, they turned into homes, garages, and factories, each one a reminder of how industry could adapt to humanity's needs faster than ever before. Architects later described it as the first global prefab revolution. But for the veterans who lived in them, the huts carried a deeper memory. Sergeant Eddie Ramirez, the Seabee who once built them on Guadalcanal, returned home to California and bought a surplus Quonset hut for his family. He painted it white, added wooden floors, and planted a small garden outside the door. To his neighbors, it looked odd, a piece of the Pacific transplanted to the suburbs. To him, it was safety. It kept us alive, he told his son. So now it keeps us warm. Across the ocean, in Yorkshire, a row of old Nissen huts stood abandoned on an airfield, ghosts of another era. Yet historians and preservationists kept a few standing, reminders of the ingenuity that began it all. Today, the legacies of both huts endure. The Nissen hut remains a monument to Britain's endurance, the bridge between two world wars. The Quonset hut remains a symbol of American efficiency, proof that simplicity can be revolutionary. Their curved silhouettes, once born from destruction, became blueprints for creation, precursors to the modern prefab homes, military bases, and even space habitats that followed. As the camera pans across a quiet landscape of rusted steel and green fields, the narrator's voice fades in. One hut built by hand, the other by an assembly line. One took a week, the other a day. Together, they sheltered a generation through the darkest years of war and laid the foundations for the peace that followed.